For this week's discussion topic, we will be going over, does the classic WoW community have a gatekeeping problem? And I think, not really, but also kind of. It's a complicated issue, one that I hope to go over in a little bit. First off, what is gatekeeping? For those of you who don't know, gatekeeping is a term you use for someone who thinks you can't be a fan of something unless you meet certain criteria. Say, for example, someone who says they're a fan of Harry Potter, and therefore a huge geek. Someone could gatekeep that by asking very specific questions about Harry Potter. Be like, what is, Harry Potter's dad's name or something? If you're a true Harry Potter fan, you'll know that answer right off the bat. I don't actually know that answer. I want to say it's Robert, but that doesn't sound right. You see, I read all the books and everything before the movies came out. I just don't remember specific details like that. So if I were to be calling myself a Harry Potter fan, a gatekeeper might, deny me that fandom tag or whatever. That's kind of what gatekeeping is. It happens sometimes, and there's a lot of it in the classic WoW community. But it's a little bit more complicated when it comes to the classic WoW community, because the whole thing about them is they want the video game to exist in a certain way that is like an objective fact. They want it to be as close to the original vanilla WoW from 2005 as possible. So if people want too many changes to that, there are basically gatekeeping it. Like, you can't be a classic WoW fan if you want the Dungeon Finder or something like that. That is classic gatekeeping, and it's pretty bad. But in this specific case, it seems almost reasonable. Because, yes, that is kind of what the whole classic WoW thing is about. The point I'm trying to make here is, when does it go too far, though? You see, classic WoW, a lot of the community thinks everyone should experience it in one certain way. So there's lots of complaints about classic WoW on the forums and everything, a lot more when the demo was out, or whenever they have new information about it. They all complain about different things based on an assumption of how they believe classic WoW should be played. And in order to have the correct opinion of vanilla WoW, you need to have played in vanilla WoW when it was current content, you need to enjoy grinding, and you need to enjoy the community aspect, or enjoy grouping up to accomplish goals. If you do not meet all three of these criteria, then your opinion on what classic WoW should be doesn't matter. And here's where this can be kind of a problem. Say, for example, half of the community is getting incredibly upset because Blizzard believes that loot trading should be in the game. If someone were to chime in and say, you know what, I don't think having loot trading is that big of a deal. It doesn't really do much to diminish the vanilla WoW experience. To which a lot of people will start asking them the gatekeeping questions. Like, did you play in vanilla WoW? If not, then you're not allowed to have an opinion on this matter. Or certain things like that. I don't think the grinding or community aspect really comes into it. Because if I were to go over the 3 points, vanilla WoW is very grindy, and if you don't like grindy, you're probably not going to like vanilla WoW. And at that point, that's just kind of like a preference thing. You probably shouldn't play the game because there is going to be a lot of grinding. And if you're someone who doesn't like grinding and you want to play vanilla WoW, but you want it without the grinding, that kind of goes against what it's about. So I understand the gatekeeping on that front. And the community aspect thing, vanilla WoW, since there's no dungeon finder or, all of the conveniences we have today, you have to ask in trade chat and, all the really slow and annoying shit. I don't like that crap. I very much love playing WoW as a solo player, but I'm not going to get too much into that right now, because that's a very large topic. Surprisingly, people hate it when I say WoW has good single-player content. For some reason, they'll always bring up the fact that it's an MMO. That means you have to play with other people. And I'm just like, you know what? I do what I want. I don't care. But it is a huge point of contention for a lot of people. So I'm just going to skip it and go straight into... What was I talking about? It was something about gatekeeping and... Oh, right. The whole loot trading thing. Basically, people don't want loot trading in vanilla WoW. For those of you who don't know, loot trading is the thing where if you master loot a piece of gear to you, you can trade it to someone else within like 2 hours. And then after that 2 hours is over, it's bound to you. That wasn't in vanilla WoW. That wasn't added until like Wrath or something. And basically without loot trading, it makes it a lot easier to ninja loot, which was a big part of vanilla WoW. Sometimes the loot would just be given to the wrong person, and then they'd be screwed, and they wouldn't be able to trade it unless they contacted a GM, which required a lot of manpower to constantly use a GM to assign loot to people who made a mistake, which is perfectly natural because humans are bound to make mistakes. So in order to very smartly reduce their overhead and not have to hire extra people or waste their GM's times trading people's items for them, they're just going to have loot trading in the game. But this also means it's going to be harder to ninja loot, and that goes against the philosophy of vanilla WoW. And it's like, oh my god, how is this something people are so mad about? Really, they're super mad about people not being able to ninja loot as effectively. Oh, I can't say these kinds of things. I need to be biased about these, you know. Talk about the other side of loot trading, why people would want it and, you know, wouldn't want it in vanilla WoW. Point number 1, it wasn't in vanilla WoW, so it shouldn't be in vanilla WoW. You know, that is a point, actually. Like, one of the reasons people really want vanilla WoW is for none of the conveniences in modern WoW, and loot trading is a convenience. But it's also like a very reasonable convenience that just straight up saves Blizzard time on their end. And ultimately the result is the same. This is one of those complicated issues about the classic WoW community. Like, there are some people who want no changes at all and are not flexible. In fact, some people even want all the bugs in the game still. And then there are some people who are a little bit more reasonable and say no changes, but, you know, bug fixes. Sure. And loot trading goes against that. It's not a bug fix. It's more of a saving manpower fix. But it is technically a change. A change that really only affects ninja looters. And why would you want to give them any kind of power anyway? I should also state here, you can still ninja loot with loot trading. It's just, you can't, you know, quote, accidentally send yourself something and be like, oops, that was a mistake. Gosh darn, I guess I have to keep this brand new weapon for myself. I'd love to trade it to the person who actually won the role. No, instead they'd have to assign it to themselves and then be like, no, I'm taking it, and then like leave the raid or something. And then they would have negative connotations for that action instead of being able to maybe get away with it. And you see, all of these points I make about loot trading are completely invalid because I didn't play vanilla WoW. And that kind of goes into this whole thing of the WoW gatekeeping. Because I didn't play vanilla WoW, my opinion on this matter doesn't matter. And that is a widely held belief in a lot of the classic WoW community. Not all of them, of course, because another thing about the classic WoW community is a lot of them are just private server players. None of them have... Oh, I'm not going to say none of them. I got to really avoid using generalized statements. Not the entire classic WoW community is gatekeeping. It's just, I've seen a lot of it. I'm not even going to say if it's a minority or a majority. I've just personally seen a lot of it. And the private server players like to pretend they've played vanilla WoW. Oh man, that is another topic. Not one I'm going to make a video about. So, private server players. There are some who only ever play private servers and never even touch retail WoW, but that won't stop them from bashing it. And the best way to tell someone's a private server player is if they call BFA retail WoW, just like I did a second ago. If you see anything when they're typing and they refer to modern WoW as retail, telltale sign, private server player. Is there anything wrong with private server players? Not really. It's just, they're not above gatekeeping either. See, on my main channel, I make a lot of videos about vanilla WoW, and sometimes people will send me messages, like private messages or long comments, going over in detail about why something I said in the video was wrong. Sometimes they're right. I do make mistakes. And sometimes it's obvious that the private server they're playing on just does things differently. A big example would be the Four Horsemen fight in Naxxramas. Naxxramas is a very popular raid in private servers because it's the last raid of vanilla WoW. So I think it gets done like the most or something. I'm not a huge expert on it. But in vanilla WoW, the common raid tactic for Four Horsemen was to get 8 tanks. And back then, they also would get warrior tanks, and they made sure they had a 2-set bonus from one of the previous raids, which allowed their taunt to never miss. Because getting your abilities to the never miss status was actually kind of difficult in vanilla WoW, and they needed those taunts to be on point. Because they had 8 tanks for the fight, and they had to rotate it out, and that was like the most amount of tanks ever used for any raid fight. Most raid fights, in comparison, use 2 tanks. In vanilla WoW, it wasn't actually, all that uncommon. Some fights had like a rotation of tanks, kind of like Valistras, because a lot of the bosses couldn't be taunted for some reason. Vanilla WoW fights were kind of weird. Anyways, the strategy back then was to use 8 tanks. Some private servers have the fight tuned a little bit differently, so that private server people, with their much smaller population size, doesn't have to go out and look for 8 tanks. A lot of them can get by with just like 4 tanks, as long as their gear is good enough. Or also, this is another thing, like information has just advanced to the point where people have metagamed the crap out of everything vanilla WoW. And they've just figured out how to do a lot of the raids better than people did them back in vanilla WoW. So a lot of raid strats used on private servers are completely different from the raid strats used in vanilla WoW. So these two things combined together makes it so a lot of private servers don't use 8 tanks on 4 horsemen. So because of that, I get messages quite frequently in videos in which I mention that vanilla WoW used, 8 tanks for 4 horsemen. And they'll go in very excruciating detail about how their raid does it, how you don't need 8, how my video is super wrong, and how I'm just a wrath baby, so I should just shut up. And I get multiple of these messages, and some of them go in, they write entire essay-length things talking about their raid and their strat. And the common denominator for all of these people who send me these really long messages is that every single one of them plays on private servers. And I can tell this because of a lot of the things they say and how they mention it, in the present tense. I get so many messages about these kinds of things because I make a lot of vanilla WoW videos, and you just kind of notice the signs. I also am friends with some people in vanilla WoW private servers. So I know a lot about them, and these people are convinced that their private server is literally what vanilla WoW was like. So if their private server does something differently than what I say in a video, then I'm wrong, because I personally didn't play vanilla WoW. And how could I make a video about vanilla WoW if I didn't play it? I hear this a lot. Like, this is the one I hear the most. You can't make videos about Vanilla WoW. You can't talk about it. You can't have an opinion about it unless you personally played it yourself. And also, it's like, okay, I guess you're not allowed to write history reports about Rome unless you actually live there, or any kind of historical subject. It's not like these things were like written down or something. I can guarantee you I've done more research into these things than you have. But it just baffles the mind that so many people post things about how I'm wrong because I never played in vanilla. And it's almost like I ask other people who played in vanilla WoW and they confirm my things. Or, I cross-reference my information. It's not that hard to do. It's exactly like, it makes me wonder if they've ever taken a history class before, and if they've ever questioned that. I don't know. This is sidetracking a lot. This was all like a really long thing to say. I've personally experienced a lot of gatekeeping, but my experience is different. I've also personally seen a lot of it in other places, where people will be attacked, or, God forbid, you accidentally post in one of your replies that you didn't play Vanilla WoW, because you'll get a lot of comments about how your opinion doesn't matter, or how you're ruining the game. And that's kind of the gatekeeping problem that this video is about. Does the classic WoW community have a gatekeeping problem? In my personal experience, yes, they have a huge one. But my experience is way different from other people, because how many other people make a whole bunch of videos about Vanilla WoW? So, I'm trying to keep this a little bit more general. I don't really have a negative opinion on the community as a whole, because I know a lot of people in that community, and they're pretty wholesome, and they're just very passionate about Vanilla WoW, and they want it to be as close to Vanilla WoW as possible, which is reasonable to an extent. Now let's get into sharding and starting zones, another thing that threw them for a huge loop. So, when Classic WoW launches, there's going to be a lot of people clamoring to play it, because it is a very hyped thing. There's going to be a lot of people who've never played and want to try it out for the first time. So there's going to be a ton of people in those starting zones. And part of the experience of Vanilla WoW is to not have shared loot. Shared loot is this thing where if you go out into a world quest, actually there might be a different word for it, but I'm calling it shared loot. Like if you go out for a world quest and you start attacking, like an elite, and someone else has been attacking it already, you can tag them and get credit for it. You can't do that in Vanilla WoW unless you're in a group. Or if you're going out and, the world quest is to kill 10 mobs, and someone else is already doing it, you just go around and start tagging things that they're attacking, or help them out. You wouldn't get credit with that unless you were in a group with them. And not a raid, so you can only have 5 people at a time. So without shared tagging, people are going to be fighting for tags in those starting zones like crazy. And here's another thing that people don't really... actually, that's kind of dismissive to say. I was going to say people don't remember about Vanilla WoW. No, I'm sure they remember. It's just they don't like to bring it up. But here's a thing about Vanilla WoW. Half of the quests in Classic WoW require you to go out and kill 15 of one specific animal for their tooth. Almost all of the quests require a massive amount of mob grinding. In modern WoW, that's not really the case. The most we have is probably the Outlands quests, because those are the oldest quests in the game. And those ones are actually pretty cool because they're really grouped up together. Vanilla WoW, they'd give you 2 quests to go out and, collect 5 paws of a wolf, and then 6 pelts of a different tall strider or something. So you'd go out and kill 50 of them before you got those 5 and 6 things. And then you go back, turn it in, and you get another quest to go out and kill 15. There is an incredible amount of mob killing quests. So, in a game where shared tagging isn't a thing, there's going to be an insane amount of competition. And is that really the Vanilla WoW experience, to be competing with like 100 other people just to kill a wolf. If anything, I think that's just going to dissuade people from wanting to play classic WoW. Because, it's not fun to fight for tags. I've always hated that. But that goes into the point, is like, is that a classic WoW experience? Is that part of classic WoW, being able to, fight with everyone for tags? Is like, yes, that is part of the game. Definitely. But the massive amount that there's going to be in the starting zones, I don't think so. And I think sharding is, very appropriate in those kinds of areas. Which is a super controversial opinion. Like, these people, the classic WoW community, they get so mad if there's any kind of changes like these. And I keep saying it in a really dismissive way. This is just showing my bias. I think it's silly that they get this mad over loot trading or sharding and starting zones. But this is also just to let you guys know, who probably aren't aware of these issues. These are really big deals, to the point where people are like, yeah, classic WoWs, just as long as Blizzard doesn't make these changes. Because they'll literally kill the game. And it's like, oh my god. Making mountains out of molehills. Like, complaining in of itself isn't bad. In fact, it's needed to an extent. Otherwise, nothing would change. The problem is complaining a copious amount over small things, and making them seem like bigger problems than they really are. Although, that same line of argument could be used for BFA as well. There's also another thing, not really related to gatekeeping, or mountains out of molehills, but just like the negative fallacy itself. People will think, they're just, this is another like thing I've seen. If, someone famous is going on and on about these very minor issues as if they're big deals, they'll say they're just keeping it real, or, they're just speaking their mind. They're the only ones telling the truth. They make it seem like these negative opinions are just them actually speaking their real minds, and it makes it more valuable than someone who thinks it's not a big deal. And the reason they think this is more of a psychological thing, where humans just see negative things as more real than positive ones. Like, take for example, you buy a new hat, and you're not too sure about it. And you go around and like 3 people give you compliments about the hat. It's like, ooh, nice hat. Cool looking thing. Where'd you get it or something? And then a 4th person comes and is like, wow, that hat's ugly. The average person will think that the first 3 people actually just lied to him, and that the 4th person was the only one who was real with them. When really, the first 3 people probably thought it was okay. And the 4th person, just thought it wasn't very good. But no, the real thing, because of how much emotions are tied to negative results, they would think the first 3 people were obviously just lying. So if you say anything positive about changes, if you try to be reasonable about it, that just means you're being fake. And that's why the negative stuff, gets spread a lot more. And it's like, wow, a lot of this is reminding me so much about the current hate on Battle for Azeroth. Oh my god. It's basically the same. Gamers, they're just never happy no matter what. People are just never happy. It all makes sense. Anyways, to conclude the video on this discussion topic, do you think the WoW Classic community has a gatekeeping problem? Or is their gatekeeping completely justified? Because of the very unique situation that is Classic WoW. It's not really the same thing as gatekeeping, like Harry Potter, for example. I'd love to hear your guys' opinions on this thing, because I don't really know, to be perfectly honest. Like, I think a lot of the complaining is annoying, and they're just getting really mad over stupid shit. Oh, I said a curse word. I'm still not used to being able to say those. It's great having a ad-free channel for these kinds of videos. Anyways, at the same time, I understand a lot of their points, and if they don't fight for what they want, they believe that Blizzard will just put in like LFR or something, as if that's the worst thing in the world. But it definitely goes against the classic WoW thing, and I wouldn't advocate for it unless I'm trolling, because it's really funny how mad they get about it.